The Pentagon's War Room hummed with controlled chaos at 0300 hours. Maps of Eastern Europe dominated the massive screens, red markers indicating enemy positions across a fractured diplomatic landscape. General Marcus Hayes stood at the central table, his weathered hands gripping the edge as he studied satellite imagery from the Ukrainian border. "Sir, intelligence suggests a coordinated assault within 72 hours, Colonel Rodriguez reported, her voice cutting through the ambient tension. 3 battalions moving towards strategic positions. Our allies are requesting immediate tactical support." Hayes nodded grimly. At 58, he'd commanded operations in Afghanistan, Iraq and Syria, but this felt different. The stakes were higher, the enemy more sophisticated. "Ma, what's our response time for deployment?" 18 hours minimum for full tactical readiness, came the reply from Major Thompson, the logistics coordinator. "Not fast enough." Hayes's jaw tightened. "We need options, and we need them now." The heavy doors to the war room suddenly opened with a soft hydraulic hiss. Every head turned as a woman in civilian clothes walked in. Navy blazer, pressed slacks, carrying a leather briefcase. She appeared to be in her early 30s, with sharp green eyes and auburn hair pulled into a professional bun. Her civilian status made her presence jarring in the military environment. "Excuse me." Colonel Rodriguez stepped forward, her hand instinctively moving toward her sidearm. "This is a restricted area. Identify yourself immediately." The woman didn't flinch. "Dr. Elena Vasquez, strategic consultant. I believe you're expecting me." She pulled out a laminated badge and handed it to Rodriguez. Hayes frowned. "I wasn't informed of any consultant arriving tonight." "Emergency authorization from the Secretary of Defense," Elena replied calmly, pulling out a tablet. "Classified Directive 7 Alpha. Your current tactical approach has a 63% probability of failure based on enemy movement patterns and historical data analysis." The room fell silent. Major Thompson's fingers paused over his keyboard. Colonel Rodriguez examined the credentials, her expression shifting from suspicion to confusion. "Dr. Vasquez," Hayes said, his voice measured but stern, "I don't know who you are or what strings you pulled to get in here, but we don't have time for academic theories. People's lives are at stake." Elena moved to the central display without invitation, her fingers dancing across the touchscreen interface. "General, with respect, your people's lives depend on understanding that this isn't a conventional assault." The screen transformed, showing a 3-dimensional tactical overlay. "This is a feint." "A what?" Major Thompson asked. "A diversion." Elena's voice carried quiet authority. "While you're preparing to counter their ground offensive here," she pointed to the marked positions, "their actual target is the port facility at Constanta. They want to cut off NATO's supply lines to the region." Hayes studied the new display, his skepticism warring with growing interest. "How do you know this?" "Pattern recognition. Behavioral analysis of enemy commanders based on 15 years of their tactical decisions, plus real-time satellite data that your intelligence division hasn't processed yet." Elena swiped, bringing up personnel files. "Colonel Dmitry Volkov is leading this operation. He's used identical misdirection tactics in Georgia and Crimea." Colonel Rodriguez leaned forward. "Those files are classified above top secret. How did you—" "Access comes with the job," Elena interrupted. "The question is, do you want to deploy your forces to defend an empty field, or do you want to stop the actual threat?" The war room's atmosphere shifted. The steady hum of computers seemed louder. Hayes found himself studying not just the tactical display, but the woman who had transformed it. Her confidence wasn't arrogance. It was the quiet certainty of someone who had done this before. "Assuming you're correct," Hayes said slowly, "what's your proposed response?" Elena's fingers moved across the screen again. New markers appeared, showing naval positions, air support coordinates, and supply routes. "Redirect the 3rd Infantry to defensive positions around Constanta. Use the 5th Fleet to create a naval blockade here and here. Meanwhile, leave a skeleton force at the original target to maintain the illusion that you've taken the bait." That would leave our forces divided, Major Thompson protested. Standard doctrine says, Standard doctrine assumes your enemy follows standard patterns, Elena cut him off. Volkov doesn't. He's counting on your textbook responses. Hayes walked around the table, studying the new tactical layout from different angles. 28 years of military experience told him to trust established protocols. But something about Elena's analysis felt right, a puzzle piece clicking into place. Colonel Rodriguez, what's your assessment of this alternative strategy? Rodriguez hesitated, clearly uncomfortable with the civilian consultant's presence. The tactical positioning makes sense, sir, but we'd be gambling everything on intelligence from sources we can't verify. Every military decision is a gamble, Elena said quietly. The question is whether you're betting on what you know or what you think you know. Hayes looked at the displays, then at his officers, then at the enigmatic woman who had walked uninvited into his war room. Outside, dawn was breaking over Washington, D.C., and somewhere across the Atlantic, enemy forces were moving toward targets that might not be what they seemed. Dr. Vasquez, he said finally, I need to understand exactly who you are and how you obtained this intelligence, because if you're right, you may have just prevented a disaster, and if you're wrong, he left the sentence hanging. Elena met his gaze steadily. And if I'm wrong, General, you can court-martial me after we prevent a war. The clock on the wall read 0347 hours. Time was running out, and Hayes realized he was about to make one of the most critical decisions of his career, whether to trust a woman whose background remained a complete mystery. I need verification, Hayes declared, pointing at Elena. Major Thompson, contact the Secretary of Defense's office. I want confirmation of Dr. Vasquez's authorization within 10 minutes. Elena remained calm as Thompson reached for the secure phone. You won't get through, she said matter-of-factly. Secretary Martinez is currently in a skiff meeting with NATO leadership. Communication blackout until 0600. Hayes studied her carefully. How could you possibly know that? Same way I know about Volkov's movement patterns. Information is my business, General. Elena pulled up another display. But while we're waiting for verification, your window for effective countermeasures is closing. Volkov's forces are already 12 hours into their operation. Colonel Rodriguez stepped closer to the main screen. Show me the naval positioning again. Elena complied, highlighting the maritime approaches to Constanta. Volkov's counting on your forces being concentrated inland. His submarine Wolf Pack is already moving through the Black Sea, using commercial shipping lanes as cover. Submarine activity? Major Thompson looked up from his unsuccessful phone attempts. Our sonar networks haven't detected. Your sonar networks are monitoring the wrong frequencies, Elena interrupted. These are modified Kilo-class vessels using advanced sound dampening, but they have to surface for communication bursts every 6 hours. She tapped the screen. Our next window is in 47 minutes. Hayes felt the familiar weight of command decisions, but this was different. Everything about Elena's presence challenged protocol, yet her intelligence seemed impossibly accurate. Assuming you're correct about the submarines, what's our best intercept option? USS Virginia is currently on patrol 90 nautical miles southeast of the target area. Redirect immediately, but maintain communication silence until after the enemy's next surface interval. Rodriguez frowned. How do you know the Virginia's position? That's classified operational information. Elena's green eyes fixed on the colonel. I know because I helped plan the Virginia's patrol route 3 weeks ago. The statement hung in the air like a live grenade. Hayes felt something shift in his chest. Not quite trust, but recognition. You're not just a consultant. No, General, I'm not. Before anyone could respond, the room's primary communication system crackled to life. War Room, this is Stratcom, priority alpha message for General Hayes. Hayes activated the speaker. Hayes here. Sir, we're showing unusual submarine activity in the Black Sea. Possible hostile contacts using non-standard acoustic signatures. Requesting immediate guidance. Elena didn't smile, but Hayes caught a subtle nod of satisfaction. The validation was both reassuring and unsettling. Stratcom, patch through to USS Virginia. Redirect to intercept coordinates I'm sending now. Hayes looked at Elena. Send them your positions. Already transmitted, she replied, showing her tablet screen. Virginia should have new orders within 90 seconds. Major Thompson stared at his console. Sir, she's accessing our secure networks in real time. That's impossible without presidential-level clearance. Is it impossible, or is it classified above your security level? Elena asked calmly. Hayes made a command decision. Everyone except essential personnel, clear the room. Now. Reluctantly, junior staff filed out, leaving only Hayes, Rodriguez, Thompson, and Elena. The war room felt larger and more intimate simultaneously. Dr. Vasquez, I'm going to ask once more. Who are you? Elena set down her tablet and faced him directly. I'm the person who's been tracking Colonel Volkov for 8 years. I predicted his moves in Georgia, his tactics in Crimea, and his current strategy here. I've studied every operation he's commanded, every decision he's made under pressure. That sounds like CIA work, Rodriguez observed. It sounds like personal work, Elena corrected. Volkov killed my brother in Aleppo, Lieutenant Michael Vasquez, Army Rangers. He was part of a joint task force that Volkov targeted specifically because he'd identified the colonel's pattern of using civilians as tactical shields. The room's atmosphere changed. Personal vendettas in military operations were dangerous, but they also provided motivation that pure duty couldn't match. I'm sorry for your loss, Hayes said quietly. But revenge missions? This isn't revenge, General. It's prevention. Elena's voice remained steady, but Hayes caught a flicker of pain in her eyes. Volkov's current operation isn't just about cutting supply lines. He's planning to blame NATO forces for civilian casualties at Constanta, create an international incident that fractures the alliance. Thompson's fingers flew over his keyboard. Sir, I'm seeing confirmatory intelligence from 3 separate sources. Increased media presence in the target area, unusual civilian evacuation patterns. He's setting the stage, Elena continued. Make NATO look like the aggressors, justify expanded operations throughout Eastern Europe. But if we intercept his forces before they reach Constanta, if we expose the submarine positions, the narrative collapses. Hayes studied the tactical displays with new understanding. This wasn't just about stopping an attack. It was about preventing a war. What do you need from us? Full tactical coordination, real-time intelligence sharing, and trust that I know Volkov better than anyone in this building. Colonel Rodriguez stepped forward. General, we're talking about restructuring an entire operational response based on the word of someone whose background we can't verify. Whose background you can't access, Elena corrected. There's a difference. Hayes looked at the clock. EO 413 hours. Decision time was approaching like an incoming missile. Dr. Vasquez, I need one piece of proof that your intelligence is accurate, something we can verify independently. Elena considered for a moment. In 18 minutes, Volkov will order a communication blackout for his forward units. Your signals intelligence will detect a sudden drop in enemy radio traffic at 0431 hours exactly. That's very specific, Thompson noted. Volkov's punctual. It's one of his tactical strengths and his greatest weakness. Elena moved back to the central display. If I'm right about the timing, will you trust me about the strategy? Hayes nodded slowly. If you're right about the blackout, we implement your counter-strategy. If you're wrong, if I'm wrong, you follow standard protocol and hope for the best. The war room fell silent, except for the ambient hum of electronics. 4 people waiting for 0431 hours, when either Elena's credibility would be established or her mysterious presence would become irrelevant. Hayes found himself hoping she was right, which surprised him. Trusting an unknown consultant went against every instinct he'd developed in nearly 3 decades of military service. But something about Elena's quiet confidence, her detailed knowledge, and her personal investment in stopping Volkov felt genuine. At 0431 hours exactly, Major Thompson's console lit up with alerts. "Sir, we're detecting a massive drop in enemy communications. Radio silence across all monitored frequencies." Elena didn't look triumphant. She simply nodded. "Now we work." "All right, Dr. Vasquez," Hayes said, his voice carrying new authority mixed with grudging respect. "You've proven your intelligence is accurate. Now prove your strategy will work." Elena moved to the central command console, her fingers dancing across multiple interfaces simultaneously. "Major Thompson, I need direct communication with the Virginia. Colonel Rodriguez, contact the 3rd Infantry's forward command. We're about to execute the most complex misdirection in modern naval warfare." "Misdirection?" Rodriguez asked, pulling up communication protocols. "We're going to make Volkov think his plan is working perfectly," Elena explained, bringing up a 3-dimensional battlefield display, while actually turning his own strategy against him. The main screen transformed into a real-time tactical overview. Red markers showed enemy positions, blue markers indicated Allied forces, and green markers revealed Elena's proposed movements. What emerged was an intricate dance of military positioning that made Hayes's pulse quicken. "Here's what Volkov expects," Elena began, highlighting the enemy's probable assumptions. "NATO forces concentrated at the obvious target, standard defensive positioning, predictable response times. He's counting on us being exactly where we appear to be." "And where will we actually be?" Hayes asked. Elena's fingers moved across the screen, revealing hidden unit positions. 3rd Infantry splits into 3 groups. Alpha Group maintains visible presence at the original target, enough to sustain the illusion. Bravo Group redeploys to Constanta under communication blackout. Charlie Group takes overwatch positions here and here, creating a kill zone if Volkov's forces advance on either target. Thompson studied the positioning with growing excitement. "That's actually brilliant. We're covering both possibilities while making him think we've taken his bait." "The naval component is more complex," Elena continued. "USS Virginia intercepts the submarine Wolfpack, but doesn't engage immediately. Instead, we track them to their assault positions, then coordinate a surface fleet response that boxes them in." "Coordinate how?" Rodriguez demanded. "If the subs are using sound dampening," "They are, but they can't maintain it indefinitely. Advanced dampening systems create heat signatures that infrared satellites can detect. We've been tracking them for 6 hours without realizing it." Elena pulled up satellite imagery showing thermal anomalies in the Black Sea. "These aren't weather patterns." Hayes leaned forward, studying the heat signatures. His military experience recognized what he was seeing, but the implications were staggering. "You're telling me we've had eyes on enemy submarines without knowing it? Your intelligence analysts have been trained to look for conventional signatures. Volkov's counting on that limitation." Elena highlighted specific thermal readings. "But thermal displacement doesn't lie. 3 submarines moving in coordinated formation, timing their approach to coincide with the land assault." The secure communication system crackled. "War Room, this is USS Virginia. We have sonar contact with multiple submarines, requesting rules of engagement." Elena looked at Hayes. "This is where trust becomes critical, General. I need you to give Virginia very specific orders." "I'm listening." "Tell them to maintain passive tracking only. Do not engage until all 3 submarines surface for their pre-assault communication burst. That gives us 12 minutes to coordinate a surface fleet response that captures or destroys all 3 simultaneously." Hayes hesitated. Allowing enemy submarines to reach assault positions violated every tactical principle he'd ever learned. "If you're wrong about their surface timing, they'll launch their attack and we'll have lost everything," Elena finished. But if I'm right, we capture or destroy 3 advanced submarines and their crews, plus all the intelligence they're carrying." Colonel Rodriguez stepped forward. "General, I recommend we engage the submarines immediately. Allowing them to reach attack positions is unacceptably risky. It's also the only way to stop this operation permanently," Elena countered. "Sink them individually and Volkov adapts. Capture them in coordinated action, and we expose his entire network. Hayes felt the weight of command settling on his shoulders. 3 decades of military experience warred with the tactical insights of a woman whose background remained largely mysterious. Major Thompson, what's our surface fleet positioning? USS Porter and USS McCain are 18 minutes from intercept positions. HMS Dragon can provide additional support if needed. Elena nodded. Perfect. Here's the coordination sequence. The display shifted, showing precise timing markers. Virginia maintains passive tracking until 0547 hours. Submarines surface for communication burst at 0549. Surface vessels engage simultaneously at 0551, creating a triangular enclosure with no escape routes. That's a 2-minute window, Thompson observed. If the timing's off by even 30 seconds, the timing won't be off, Elena said with quiet confidence. Volkov's submarine commanders follow protocols religiously. Communication bursts occur every 6 hours, plus or minus 90 seconds for operational security. I've documented this pattern across 14 separate operations. Hayes made his decision. Virginia, this is General Hayes. Maintain passive tracking of submarine contacts. Do not engage until specifically ordered. Acknowledge. Acknowledge, sir. Passive tracking only. Rodriguez looked uncomfortable. Sir, if this goes wrong, Colonel, we face the consequences. If it goes right, we prevent a war. Hayes turned back to Elena. What about the land forces? How do we coordinate the misdirection there? Elena brought up the terrestrial battlefield display. Volkov's ground commanders are watching your troop movements via satellite. We give them exactly what they expect to see: apparent panic, rushed defensive positioning, standard NATO response protocols. While actually doing what? Hayes asked. While actually implementing a pincer movement that turns their assault into a kill zone. Elena highlighted the movement patterns. Bravo Group approaches Constanta from the north, but maintains radio silence. Charlie Group positions for crossfire coverage. When Volkov's forces commit to their assault, they'll find themselves surrounded. The tactical elegance was undeniable. Hayes found himself admiring not just the strategy, but the psychological insight that made it possible. You really have been studying Volkov for 8 years. Every decision, every tactical preference, every moment of battlefield stress. Elena's voice carried a personal weight that went beyond professional analysis. He's predictable because he's successful. Success breeds patterns, and patterns create vulnerabilities. And his biggest vulnerability? Thompson asked. Arrogance. Volkov believes Western military leaders are too rigid to adapt quickly. He counts on our adherence to doctrine, our committee-based decision-making, our unwillingness to take tactical risks. Elena looked directly at Hayes. He doesn't expect a general to bet everything on the analysis of a civilian consultant he's never met. The war room fell silent. Outside, dawn was fully breaking over Washington, and across the Atlantic, the most complex military operation of Hayes's career was about to unfold. Timing markers are set, Elena announced. All units are in position. In 11 minutes, we'll know if we've prevented a war or started one. Hayes looked at the tactical display, then at his officers, then at the enigmatic woman who had walked into his war room and changed everything. Dr. Vasquez, I hope you understand what we're risking here. I understand what we're preventing, General, and I understand what my brother died trying to stop. The clock read 0538 hours, 11 minutes, until Elena's prediction would be tested by reality. Contact, contact, multiple submarine signatures surfacing simultaneously. The voice of USS Virginia's sonar operator crackled through the war room speakers at exactly 0549 hours. Elena didn't show triumph, only intense focus as she coordinated multiple communication channels. General, this is it. Order the surface vessels to execute encirclement pattern Alpha 7. Hayes keyed the communications. Porter, McCain, Dragon, execute encirclement Alpha 7. Box them in, gentlemen. The main tactical display erupted with activity. Blue markers representing Allied naval vessels converged on red submarine positions with mathematical precision. Elena's fingers flew across multiple interfaces, coordinating the most complex naval operation Hayes had witnessed in his career. Virginia reports 3 submarines fully surfaced, Major Thompson announced. They're attempting to dive, but our surface vessels have them locked. Negative on diving permission, Elena said sharply into her headset. McCain, deploy active sonar at maximum intensity. Make diving impossible. Hayes watched the tactical ballet unfold with growing amazement. Elena wasn't just coordinating, she was conducting every movement precisely timed, every vessel positioned exactly where her strategy demanded. War Room, this is HMS Dragon. We have visual confirmation on submarine number 3. It's flying a false flag, sir. Romanian colors. Elena nodded grimly. Exactly as predicted. Volkov planned to make this look like a Romanian naval exercise gone wrong. International incident. NATO credibility destroyed. Diabolical, Rodriguez muttered, monitoring ground force communications. Sir, we're getting reports from Constanta. Civilian news crews are arriving in unusual numbers, almost like they were expecting something to happen. Media manipulation, Elena explained while maintaining coordination with the naval vessels. Document everything happening out there, Colonel. We'll need evidence of the setup. The tactical situation shifted suddenly as Hayes's console lit up with alerts. Ground forces are moving, he announced. Volkov's infantry is advancing toward both targets simultaneously. Right on schedule, Elena replied. Major Thompson, signal Bravo and Charlie groups. Execute pincer movement on my mark. Thompson's hands hesitated over the controls. Ma'am, we're about to commit our forces to positions with no fallback options. Trust the plan, Major, Hayes ordered, though his own heart rate was climbing. Elena's strategy was working perfectly, but the risk was enormous. If Volkov deviated from predicted patterns, ground contacts approaching Constanta perimeter, came the report from 3rd Infantry's forward observer. Estimate company strength, mechanized infantry, moving fast. Elena studied the ground tactical display. They're moving too fast, she observed. Volkov's pushing harder than his historical patterns suggest. Hayes felt ice in his veins. What does that mean? It means he knows something we don't, or... Elena paused, her green eyes suddenly wider. Or he knows something about us that we didn't expect him to know. The war room's atmosphere changed instantly. Hayes's command experience recognized the shift from tactical execution to potential trap. Explain. If Volkov suspected NATO had intelligence about his real plan, he might have prepared a counter-strategy. Use our knowledge against us. Elena pulled up communication intercepts. Major Thompson, any unusual enemy radio traffic in the last 10 minutes? Thompson scanned his displays frantically. Actually, yes. Burst transmission from an unknown source about 6 minutes ago. Couldn't decrypt it. Elena's face went pale. He knows. Volkov knows we redirected forces to Constanta. Hayes felt the familiar sensation of a battle plan collapsing. How is that possible? Counterintelligence. If he suspected information leaks, he might have fed false intelligence to different sources, then watched for NATO responses. Elena's fingers moved across her displays with renewed urgency. General, we need to assume our positions are compromised. War Room, this is Bravo Group Leader, came the radio call. We're detecting movement consistent with enemy forces preparing an ambush. Repeat, possible enemy ambush ahead of our position. Hayes's 30 years of command experience kicked into high gear. All units, halt advance. Defensive positions now. Negative, Elena said sharply. General, stopping now gives Volkov exactly what he wants. NATO forces frozen in indecision while he executes his real plan. Which is what exactly? Rodriguez demanded. Elena brought up a new tactical overlay that made everyone in the war room stare in silence. Instead of the expected 2-target operation, the display showed a 3rd assault force moving toward a previously unidentified target. The Kogalniceanu Air Base, Elena announced grimly, Romania's primary NATO facility. While we've been focused on Constanta and the decoy target, Volkov's been moving his primary assault force toward the airbase. Hayes felt the ground shift under his feet. That would give him control of NATO's entire Eastern European air support network, and justify permanent Russian military presence in Romania, Elena added. Claim they're protecting the facility from NATO aggression. Thompson's console erupted with new alerts. Sir, radar contacts approaching Kogalniceanu. Multiple aircraft, low altitude, unknown identification. Elena's tactical display updated in real time, showing the true scope of Volkov's operation. It's a triple feint. The submarines were meant to be discovered. The ground assaults were meant to divide our attention, all while his air assault captures the real prize. Hayes stared at the display, recognizing both tactical brilliance and the potential for catastrophic failure. Dr. Vasquez, if you're right, we have approximately 15 minutes before enemy forces control Romania's primary NATO facility. 12 minutes, Elena corrected, studying flight path projections. But we have assets Volkov doesn't know about. What assets? Elena smiled for the first time since entering the war room. The ones I didn't tell him about in my counterintelligence feeds. Hayes felt hope and suspicion in equal measure. You've been feeding Volkov information. Carefully controlled information, true enough to maintain credibility, incomplete enough to hide our real capabilities. Elena pulled up classified deployment records. General, what would you say if I told you the Air Force has been running a classified exercise 50 miles from Kogalniceanu for the past week? Thompson's eyes widened as he accessed the exercise files. Exercise Thunderstorm. 2 squadrons of F-22 Raptors, supposedly training for Arctic operations. Supposedly, Elena confirmed. Actually pre-positioned for exactly this scenario. Hayes felt the tactical situation shift again, but this time in NATO's favor. You've been planning this operation for weeks. Months, Elena corrected, ever since we detected Volkov's initial reconnaissance of Romanian facilities. Rodriguez stared at Elena with new understanding. You're not just a consultant, you're running this entire operation. Elena met her gaze steadily. I'm preventing the war my brother died trying to stop. Everything else is details. The clock showed 6:03 hours, 12 minutes until Volkov's air assault reached Kogalniceanu. Hayes realized he was no longer just commanding a defensive operation. He was participating in the most complex counterintelligence operation in modern military history. Dr. Vasquez, he said quietly, I hope you know what you're doing. General, I've been preparing for this moment for 8 years. Volkov taught me everything I know about tactical planning. Elena's green eyes fixed on the main display. Now it's time to show him what I learned. Thunderstorm flight. This is Pentagon War Room actual. Hayes spoke into the secure communication system. You are cleared for immediate intercept of hostile aircraft approaching Kogalniceanu. Authorization Alpha Black. Elena watched the tactical display as 8 blue markers representing F-22 Raptors changed course toward the incoming enemy formation. Her hands moved across multiple interfaces with the precision of a concert pianist, coordinating simultaneous operations across land, sea, and air. Thunderstorm leader acknowledges, came the crisp reply. Multiple bogies on radar, Russian-made aircraft, no IFF transponders, engaging in 90 seconds. Submarines are attempting emergency dive, Major Thompson reported from his naval coordination console. But our active sonar is preventing successful submersion. They're sitting ducks. Elena nodded without taking her eyes off the primary display. Colonel Rodriguez, what's the status of ground forces at both targets? Bravo and Charlie groups report enemy forces have halted their advance. They appear to be confused, sir, like they're waiting for orders that aren't coming. Hayes studied Elena's face, recognizing the expression of someone watching carefully laid plans unfold. Dr. Vasquez, there's something you haven't told us about this operation. Elena finally looked up from her displays. General, what would you do if you discovered that your most trusted communication network had been compromised for 6 months? The implications hit Hayes like a physical blow. You've been intercepting Volkov's communications. Not intercepting, replacing. Elena brought up a new interface, showing communication logs spanning months of operations. Every order Volkov has sent to his field commanders in the last 6 months has passed through systems we control. Thompson stared at the logs in amazement. You've been editing his orders? Subtly, changing timing by minutes, altering coordinates by hundreds of meters, modifying tactical preferences just enough to create the opportunities we needed. Elena highlighted specific message modifications. Volkov thinks he's been conducting a masterful deception operation. In reality, he's been dancing to music we've been playing. Rodriguez leaned back in her chair. This is the most elaborate counterintelligence operation I've ever seen. It had to be, Elena replied. Volkov doesn't make tactical mistakes. The only way to defeat him was to make him defeat himself. The tactical display updated with new information as Thunderstorm Flight engaged the enemy aircraft. Multiple kills confirmed, came the report. Hostile aircraft neutralized with minimal resistance. They appear to have been caught completely by surprise. Hayes nodded grimly. Because Volkov's pilots were expecting different timing, different approach vectors, different defensive positioning. Exactly. Every element of his plan was perfectly executed according to his orders. Unfortunately for him, his orders weren't actually his orders. Elena brought up the real-time submarine situation. Naval engagement is concluding. All 3 submarines are surfacing under the guns of our surface vessels. Any casualties? Hayes asked. Minimal. Volkov's submarine commanders are following protocols for surrender rather than engaging in hopeless combat. Elena paused. Because the protocols they're following aren't the ones Volkov actually sent. Thompson shook his head in amazement. You've been rewriting their rules of engagement to minimize casualties. My brother believed that even in war, unnecessary death should be prevented when possible, Elena said quietly. This operation captures enemy forces and intelligence while minimizing bloodshed on both sides. The secure communication system crackled with updates from multiple fronts. Ground forces reported enemy units surrendering en masse, apparently confused by contradictory orders. Naval vessels confirmed capture of sophisticated submarine technology and personnel. Air defense systems reported successful interception of the air assault with no NATO casualties. Hayes looked at the tactical display showing comprehensive victory across all theaters of operation. Dr. Vasquez, this level of coordination would require years of preparation and access to intelligence sources I can't even imagine. Elena saved her operational files and stepped back from the control interfaces. General, there's something else I need to tell you about who I am. The war room fell silent. Hayes sensed they were approaching the final revelation in a night full of surprises. 8 years ago, when Lieutenant Michael Vasquez was killed in Aleppo, his sister Elena was completing her doctoral dissertation on asymmetric warfare patterns, Elena began. That sister had already been recruited by a joint task force investigating Russian tactical innovations. Rodriguez frowned. Which task force? The one that doesn't officially exist, Elena replied. In the one that's been tracking and countering Russian hybrid warfare operations since Crimea. Hayes felt pieces clicking into place. Your military intelligence. I'm something new, Elena corrected. A hybrid analyst for hybrid warfare. Academic credentials, civilian status, military access and intelligence authority. Created specifically to fight opponents like Volkov, who don't fit traditional categories. Thompson looked up from his console. Ma'am, we're getting reports that Colonel Volkov himself has been captured, attempting to flee the Kogalniceanu area. Elena's expression didn't change, but Hayes caught a flicker of something deeper than professional satisfaction. Alive? Yes, ma'am. Romanian forces report he surrendered without resistance when surrounded. Elena nodded slowly. He'll be confused about how his perfect plan failed so completely. That confusion will be valuable during interrogation. Hayes studied the tactical display, showing the complete resolution of what had begun as a potential international crisis. Dr. Vasquez, this operation prevented a war, but it also represents a fundamental change in how we approach military intelligence. The world changed, General. Our enemies adapted to new realities. We had to adapt too. Elena began packing her equipment. Volkov represented the old model, brilliant, experienced, but predictable within established patterns. The new model requires understanding that information itself is a weapon. Colonel Rodriguez stood up. What happens now? Now we process the intelligence we've gathered, integrate the lessons learned, and prepare for the next Volkov. Elena paused at the door. Because there's always a next one. Hayes walked her to the exit. Dr. Vasquez, I have to ask, was any of tonight improvised, or did you plan everything that happened? Elena turned back with a slight smile. General, the best plans leave room for improvisation. Tonight required both. And your brother? Would he have approved of this approach? Elena's smile faded. Michael believed that the highest duty of a soldier was to prevent the wars that others would have to fight. Tonight, we prevented one. She paused. I think he would have understood. As Elena disappeared into the Pentagon's corridors, Hayes returned to the war room where his officers were beginning the extensive after-action documentation. The tactical displays still showed the comprehensive success of an operation that had redefined his understanding of modern warfare. Major Thompson looked up from his reports. Sir, do we even know her real name? Hayes considered the question. Major, I'm not sure it matters. What matters is that she walked into our war room and changed everything. Outside, the Washington, D.C. sunrise painted the Pentagon's walls with golden light. Across the Atlantic, a potential war had been prevented by a woman whose true identity remained as mysterious as her extraordinary capabilities. The war room returned to its normal rhythm, but Hayes knew nothing would ever be quite the same. Elena Vasquez had walked into his domain as a mysterious consultant and revealed herself as something unprecedented. A new kind of warrior for a new kind of warfare. Colonel Rodriguez, Hayes said finally, I want a full debrief on tonight's operation. Every detail, every decision point, every lesson learned. Yes, sir. And Dr. Vasquez's role? Hayes looked at the tactical displays still showing the comprehensive success of Elena's strategy. Doctor, Vasquez's role gets classified at the highest levels. What happened here tonight stays here. Understood, sir. As his officers continued their documentation, Hayes reflected on the night's events. A woman had walked into the Pentagon's most secure facility, demonstrated knowledge that challenged every assumption about intelligence gathering, and orchestrated a victory that prevented international catastrophe. More importantly, she had shown him that the future of warfare would be fought by people who understood that information, timing, and psychological insight could be more powerful than any traditional weapon. Elena Vasquez had walked into the war room. By the time she left, she had proven herself to be exactly what she claimed, the master strategist who could outthink the enemies that conventional military thinking couldn't touch. The clock read 0647 hours. Dawn had broken over Washington, and with it, a new understanding of what victory looked like in the modern world.